The captive alien girl John had seen many things in his years as a mercenary. War, danger, and the kind of chaos that could break a person. But nothing compared to what he found in the heart of the alien fortress. The walls were cold and metallic, stretching high above him like an endless maze. The air smelled like ozone and oil, a mixture that made him uneasy. But it was the silence that unnerved him most. He moved cautiously through the corridors, his boots making little sound against the cold steel floor. The only light came from flickering overhead bulbs that cast strange shadows, making the whole place feel alive, as though it was watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. But John was no amateur. He had been in tighter spots before, and he wasn't about to let this mission slip away. His target was near an alien girl, held captive in the depths of this fortress. John had heard the rumors, of course. People talked about her, about the strange creature with glowing blue skin, a prisoner of a warlord from another galaxy. She was said to be the key to something huge, something that could change everything, but no one knew what. Some said she was a weapon, others that she was an ancient being with powers that could bend reality itself. But for John, none of that mattered. The job was simple. Get in, get her out, and get paid. As he rounded the corner, he saw the door. A thick, reinforced metal thing, standing out from the rest of the cold walls. His mission log told him it would be locked with a high-tech system, but he was prepared for that. He took a deep breath, drew out his tools, and went to work. Within minutes, the door slid open with a hiss. Inside, the room was dark, almost unnaturally. The air was colder here, and the only sound was the soft hum of machinery in the background. And there, in the center of the room, was the girl. She was chained to a steel pillar, her arms raised above her head, her legs shackled to the cold floor. She looked frail, almost fragile, but there was an undeniable strength in the way she held herself. Her skin, a pale blue, seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, and her long, silver hair cascaded around her face in a strange, ethereal way. Her eyes, though, were what drew John's attention. They were not like any eyes he had ever seen before. They were large, a deep shade of violet, and they seemed to hold knowledge, an ancient, cosmic kind of knowledge that made him feel small, insignificant. John stepped forward, his heart racing, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The girl's gaze locked onto his, and for a moment he couldn't move. It was as though she was reading his mind, seeing into the very core of his being, and it unnerved him. She didn't speak, but her eyes said it all. She knew why he was there. Don't come any closer. Her voice was a soft whisper, yet it filled the entire room, echoing in his ears. John froze, his hand halfway to his gun. He had heard of telepathy, but he didn't believe in it, not until now. Her voice wasn't coming from her mouth, but directly into his mind. I'm not here to hurt you, he said, his voice hoarse. I'm here to free you. The girl's expression didn't change, but she tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. You can't free me, she said. You don't know what you're dealing with. John gritted his teeth. He wasn't a man who liked to be told what he couldn't do. I've dealt with worse, he said, stepping closer. I've survived worse. She let out a soft sigh, as if humoring him. You don't understand, she said again, her voice softening. This place is a prison, yes, but it's not just a prison for me. It's a prison for everything I am. If you release me, you will release more than just me. You will release everything. John frowned, confused. What was she talking about? What do you mean? He asked, his voice dropping. She finally broke. Eye contact, her head dropping as she closed her eyes, her face softening with what looked like sorrow. You're not ready to know, she whispered, her voice filled with sadness. John felt a strange tug in his chest as he looked at her. Despite the chains, the fear, and the uncertainty in the air, there was something about her that made him feel connected to her. He didn't know how, but it was as though he was meant to be there at that exact moment to help her. He stepped forward and knelt beside her, careful not to touch her, not wanting to set off whatever strange power she seemed to hold. His eyes scanned the chains that bound her, and with a practiced hand, he quickly began to work on the locks. As he did, he glanced up at her again. "You'll regret this," she warned quietly, her voice almost a whisper now. But John ignored her, his mind focused on the task at hand. The chains clicked open with a soft hiss, and as they fell to the ground, the girl's body relaxed. The moment she was free, she took a step back, her body glowing brighter, her presence becoming more intense. It was as if the room itself bent. In response to her, "Thank you," she said softly, but her voice held a strange depth, as though there was something more she wasn't telling him. Something far greater than he could understand. John stepped back, his mind racing with questions. What had he just done? What had he just freed? And what would happen next? Before he could ask another question, she spoke again. "There's more to you than you know, human. And there's more to this war than you can imagine." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving John standing in the room, alone with his thoughts. The adventure had just begun, and he was no longer sure whether he was ready for it. The cold metallic walls of the fortress seemed to hum in the darkness, their vibrations almost like a warning. John watched the alien girl closely as she stepped away from the chains. Her movements were fluid, graceful, and unnervingly quiet. Her eyes, though still filled with that strange violet intensity, shifted to meet his gaze. For a split second, he could have sworn he saw a flicker of something, fear perhaps. Or maybe it was something else entirely. She was hiding. Something. John could feel it, but now wasn't the time to ask questions. He had freed her, but now the real challenge was escaping. The alarms would go off soon, he was sure of it. They had to leave, and they had to leave fast. "Can you run?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the growing tension. The girl didn't answer immediately. Instead, she seemed to consider his words, her violet eyes narrowing slightly. "I can do more than that," she replied, her voice echoing in his mind once again. It was a strange sensation, hearing words without hearing them, but he had become used to it now, like an odd echo bouncing off the walls of his brain. Without another word, the girl stepped toward the far corner of the room. John watched her, his heart pounding in his chest. What was she planning? Was she going to attack him? The way she moved was too confident, too powerful. He stepped back, ready to draw his weapon at a moment's notice. But instead of attacking him, she reached out with her hands and touched the wall. The faint blue glow around her intensified, and John felt the air in the room shift. It was as if the very atmosphere was bending in response to her touch. The walls hummed louder, and then, to John's astonishment, a small section of the wall slid open, revealing a hidden corridor beyond. It was dark, but he could see the faintest hint of light, far in the distance. "You've got to be kidding me," John muttered under his breath, still in disbelief. He had assumed she was just a prisoner, a helpless alien. He had no idea she could do things like this. This wasn't just an ordinary escape plan, it was something more. Something that would take him far from what he had expected. The girl looked at him, her eyes glowing brighter now. "This way," she said simply, as though they were merely walking through a normal door. She turned and started down the corridor. Without waiting for him, John hesitated, torn between his instincts and the strange connection he felt with her. But time was running out. He had to follow. John followed closely behind her, his footsteps echoing in the narrow, dimly lit passage. The sound of distant voices and the thumping of boots grew louder, and John knew their time was short. They needed to get out of the fortress before the guards found them. He quickly checked his gear, a small pistol, some explosives, and a few other tools, and made sure his gun was ready. The girl's pace quickened, and she glanced back at him with a look that seemed almost Amused. "You're not used to this, are you?" she asked, her voice once again echoing in his mind. "No," John admitted. "This is definitely not what I signed up for." She didn't respond, but he could tell she wasn't bothered by the danger. She moved with purpose, her glowing skin lighting up the dark corridor like a beacon. John could barely keep up. Her speed was unnatural. How did she move so fast? They came to another set of doors, heavier, thicker than the last. This one was locked with a complex security system, but the girl seemed to know exactly what to do. She raised her hand toward it, and the locks began to click and twist of their own accord, as though she was manipulating the very technology itself. John couldn't help but feel a deep sense of awe and fear. This wasn't just an alien girl. She was something else entirely. As the doors slid open, he felt a strange chill wash over him. He had always believed in the power of technology, but this was something beyond human comprehension. They stepped through the door and into a larger chamber, a space filled with ancient-looking machines and strange alien equipment. But before John could take it all in, the girl turned sharply, pressing her hand to a panel on the wall. The floor beneath them began to rumble, and the walls started to shift. "What's happening?" John asked, a sense of panic creeping into his voice. The girl didn't answer. She stepped back, her eyes locked on something far ahead. John followed her gaze, his hand instinctively going to his weapon. A massive door, larger than anything he had seen before, slowly began to rise, revealing a small ship waiting for them at the far end of the room. It was sleek, with smooth lines that seemed to pulse with energy, almost as if it was alive. The girl walked towards it without hesitation, and John, still in shock, followed. The moment they stepped into the ship, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening thud. The girl's movements were swift, almost graceful as she activated the ship's controls. John could feel the sudden shift in pressure as the ship powered up, lifting off the ground with barely a sound. The fortress they had escaped from was already starting to fade into the distance as the ship shot upward into the sky. John stared out of the viewport, feeling a mix of awe and dread. What had he just gotten himself into? As the ship raced into the night sky, the alien girl turned to him, her violet eyes meeting his once again. This time, there was no fear in them, only something much deeper. "You've made the right choice, John," she said, her voice calm, but full of an unspoken promise. But what choice was that? John couldn't answer. He could only stare at the stars ahead, feeling as though he was being pulled into something much larger than he could comprehend. A stranger in a strange world, the ship surged through the atmosphere, leaving Earth behind as it sped toward the unknown. John sat in silence, staring out the viewport, watching the stars stretch and warp as the ship's engine hummed with a power he couldn't begin to understand. The girl, who had once been a prisoner, now sat across from him, her violet eyes closed in quiet concentration. He couldn't quite place it, but there was something profoundly unsettling about her calm. It was as if she was already at peace with the chaos around them, while John was still trying to catch his breath. "Where are we going?" he finally asked, his voice betraying his uncertainty. He hadn't expected to be in space, not this quickly, and certainly not with an alien he had just freed from captivity. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Her eyes opened slowly, meeting his, and for the first time, he noticed something in her gaze. It was an emotion he couldn't identify, one that hinted at something deeper, something more significant. She wasn't just a prisoner. She wasn't just a strange alien girl. She was a part of something bigger, something he was now a part of. "Whether he liked it or not, we're going to a place where you can learn the truth," she said, her voice steady, almost detached. "A place where you'll understand what you've just unleashed." John leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "Unleashed? What do you mean? I just helped you escape. I don't know what's going on. I'm not part of whatever this is." He shook his head, This isn't my fight." The girl's lips curved into a slight smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You're already part of it, John, whether you like it or not." John's heart skipped a beat. He had heard that tone before, something akin to fate, as though everything was already written, as if he was being drawn into something far beyond his control. And deep down, despite his resistance, he knew it was true. For the first time since he had met her, John felt a pang of fear. It was like standing at the edge of an abyss, knowing that one wrong step would send him spiraling into something he couldn't possibly escape from. He had chosen to free her, but what had that decision truly cost him? "Who are you?" he asked, his voice softer now, tinged with curiosity. "What's your real name?" The girl didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at him, her violet eyes shimmering in the dim light of the ship. There was a long pause, a silence that seemed to stretch on forever, as if she were weighing her words carefully. "You can call me Lyra," she said, her voice low and steady, "but that's not the name I was born with. I was never meant to have a name, not in the way you think of it." John's mind raced as he tried to make sense of her words. No name? Was she some kind of a creature with no identity, no past? That wasn't possible. He had to know more. "What do you mean you were never meant to have a name?" He pressed, his confusion growing. Lyra glanced down, her expression hardening. "I come from a race that transcends names, John. We don't define ourselves by what we're called. We are connected to something far older than your kind. Something older than time itself. You can't understand that yet, but you will, in time." John's mind was reeling. "So you're not from Earth, not like anyone I've ever known," he said, more to himself than to her. He had to admit, it was hard to look at her and not feel a sense of awe and wonder. She wasn't just an alien in the traditional sense. She was something else entirely. Lyra met his gaze again, her expression unreadable. "No, I'm not from your world, but I've been here longer than you can imagine. I've seen the rise and fall of civilizations, watched the stars change, and lived through things your kind can't even fathom." John stared at her, his mouth dry. "Then why are you here? Why were you captured?" The question hung in the air, unanswered for a long time, until finally, Lyra spoke. "I was captured because I hold the key to something much larger than this planet. I carry knowledge, power, and the ability to connect with forces that have been hidden from your kind for millennia. But it's not just about me. It's about the balance of the universe. If I'm not protected, if the wrong people get there, hands on me." She trailed off, a shiver passing through her, though it wasn't from the cold. John leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "And what exactly are you protecting me from? What's so dangerous about you?" Lyra stood up, walking to the front of the ship where the view of the universe stretched out before them. Her form, glowing faintly in the darkness, seemed to take on an ethereal quality as she turned back to face him. "I'm not the one who's dangerous," she said quietly. "But the ones after me are. They've been hunting me for years, John. They've already found your world. Earth is just the beginning. I'm the key to stopping them. But I need your help." John felt a strange pull in his chest as he stood and walked toward her. Help with what? She looked at him for a long moment, as though deciding whether to trust him with the full truth. Finally, she spoke again, her voice steady but filled with gravity. "I need to get to the Nexus, a place hidden far from this galaxy. There, we can stop the war before it spreads to every corner of the universe. The fate of not just your world, but countless others rests on what we do next. If we fail, it will be the end of everything." The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy fog. This wasn't just some alien girl he had freed. She was a messenger, a catalyst, and now, for better or worse, he was involved in something far larger than he could comprehend. And as the ship sped toward the unknown, John couldn't help but feel that his life would never be the same again. He wasn't just part of the fight anymore, he was its key. The ship sailed smoothly through the void, its sleek surface reflecting the distant stars as it made its way to an unknown destination. John had barely slept since the escape. Every time he closed his eyes, he could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him, the decision to free Lyra, an alien girl who, it turned out, was far more than just a prisoner. She wasn't just running from something. She was carrying something powerful, something dangerous. And now John was involved in it all. He sat in the small cockpit, his mind racing. He had never signed up for this. He was just supposed to be in and out, a simple job. But now, with Lyra at his side, it was clear that there was no turning back. He could feel the strange connection between them growing stronger, but he couldn't fully understand it. Something about her made him feel like he was part of something far greater, like their fates had been intertwined long before they ever met. Lyra sat beside him, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Her glowing skin pulsed with a soft, otherworldly light, casting delicate shadows across her face. The violet eyes that had once seemed so alien now felt strangely familiar to him. She wasn't just an alien. She was someone who had seen things, done things, and experienced things that no one on Earth could ever comprehend. He turned to her, his curiosity getting the best of him. "What's next?" he asked, his voice low, filled with the weight of their situation. "Where are we going?" Lyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gazed out the viewport, her eyes fixed on the swirling stars ahead. "The Nexus," she said after a long pause, her voice distant and thoughtful. "It's a place of great power, hidden deep within a galaxy that no one has charted. A place where the boundaries between life and death, between the known and unknown, blur. It is where I must go and where you must help me." John raised an eyebrow. "Help you? I'm not sure I even understand what's happening. I thought you were just a prisoner. But now you're talking about the Nexus and power. What exactly is going on?" Lyra turned to him, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him feel as if she could see straight through him. "What I carry with me is not just knowledge, John. It is a key. The key to the Nexus itself. A place where the balance of the universe is maintained. It's where the energy that sustains all life flows from. The ones who control the Nexus control everything." John's heart skipped a beat. "And you're the key to all of this? You're telling me that a simple girl like you has the power to control the fate of the universe?" She shook her head slowly, her expression unreadable. "I'm not controlling anything. But I hold the knowledge of the Nexus within me. I was born with it. But for it to awaken, for it to truly work, I need to offer you something." John frowned. "Offer me something? What do you mean?" Lyra stood up, moving toward the center of the ship with a fluid grace. Her every movement seemed deliberate, as though each step was part of a larger plan. The Nexus doesn't just give away its power, it requires a balance, a trade. In order for me to reach it, in order for me to unlock its true potential, I need to give you something in return. Something that will bind you to it forever. John felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you talking about?" he asked, suddenly feeling a sense of dread creeping up on him. "What do you need to give me?" She stopped in front of him. Her violet eyes locked onto his with an intensity he hadn't seen before. "I need to give you the gift." John's pulse quickened. He didn't know what she meant by the gift, but from the way she spoke, it was clear it wasn't something to be taken lightly. "The gift?" he repeated, his voice shaky. "What kind of gift are we talking about here?" Lyra took a step closer, her presence overwhelming in the small space of the cockpit. She raised her hand, and the air around them seemed to thrum with energy. A soft, glowing light appeared in her palm, swirling and flickering like a miniature star. It was a brilliant, vibrant blue, almost the same color as her eyes, and it pulsed in time with the beat of John's heart. "This." Lyra said, her voice softer now, almost reverent, is the gift. It is the power of the nexus, the energy that flows through all life. It can heal, it can protect, it can destroy. But it is also a bond between you and the nexus. Between you and me. John could only stare, his eyes wide. The light in her hand was unlike anything he had ever seen. It seemed to hum with life, almost alive itself. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. What do I have to do with it? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. She extended her hand toward him, offering the light to him as though it were a living thing. You must accept it. Only then will you understand what I mean. Only then will you realize what you're a part of. The choice is yours. John's mind raced. He had always been a man of logic, a man who relied on reason, but this was something he couldn't explain. This was beyond anything he had ever known. Was he truly ready for this? Could he accept such a gift? But as his eyes met Lyra's, he felt something inside him stir, something that pulled him toward the light. The feeling was overwhelming, like a force stronger than his own will. He knew, deep down, that there was no turning back from this. Whatever choice he made would define his future and the fate of the universe itself. He reached out, his hand trembling, and took the gift. The moment his fingers brushed the glowing light, a surge of energy coursed through him. It was unlike anything he had ever felt, raw, primal, alive. It filled him completely, flowing into every part of him, changing him. He could feel the universe itself shifting inside him, as though the very fabric of reality was bending to his will. His body felt alive with power, but at the same time, there was a deep, overwhelming connection to something far larger, something far older. John gasped, stepping back as the world around him seemed to spin. The light in his hand flared brightly, blinding him for a moment, before it faded. The room fell silent, save for the soft hum of the ship. Lyra stood before him, watching with an expression that was both knowing and gentle. Now you understand, she said quietly. You are bound to the nexus, John. You are part of it, and it is part of you. John looked at her, his heart still racing, and for the first time since this madness had begun, he truly understood. He wasn't just a mercenary anymore. He was something more. He was a part of something far greater than anything he had ever imagined, and there was no going back. A new power. The ship drifted in the endless silence of space, far beyond the reach of Earth's atmosphere. John could feel the weight of the universe pressing down on him now, an invisible force that seemed to hang in the air with every breath he took. The gift Lyra had given him was no small thing. It wasn't just a fleeting power, something he could wield and forget. No, this was something deep within him, altering the very fabric of his being. It was a force, ancient and overwhelming, coursing through his veins, filling him with a knowledge that he could barely comprehend. He stood in the small training area of the ship, his hands clenched at his sides, trying to make sense of what had just happened. His body felt different, more attuned to something beyond the physical world. There was an energy, a hum, deep inside him, that he couldn't ignore. It was like a fire burning in the pit of his stomach, waiting to be unleashed. The air around him seemed to bend and shift in response to his thoughts. His senses were sharper, more acute. He could hear the hum of the ship's engine, the faint sound of Lyra's breathing in the next room, even the soft vibration of the stars themselves as the ship moved through space. He tried to focus to understand what was happening to him. What did you do to me? He asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. He wasn't sure if he was speaking to Lyra or to himself. But the question had to be asked. He had no idea what he had just accepted. The gift wasn't just power. It was something more. It was knowledge, it was purpose, and it was a weight that he couldn't escape. Lyra appeared in the doorway, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the low light. She didn't need to speak to him through his mind anymore. The bond between them was growing stronger. She could sense his confusion, his fear, even his curiosity. "You have a gift, John," she said, her voice calm, almost soothing, as though she had been waiting for him to ask. "It's not just a power to manipulate or control. It's the ability to understand, to connect with the forces of the universe. You're no longer just a man, you're something more. You're tied to the nexus now. The energy that flows through. You flows through everything." John shook his head. "I don't get it. I feel different. Like I'm not just me anymore." He flexed his fingers, staring at them as though they belonged to someone else. "I feel like I could destroy this ship with a thought, or reach out and change everything around me. What is this power? Why do I have it?" Lyra took a step forward, her gaze steady, unwavering. "You're feeling the energy, John. It's the energy of life itself. The nexus connects everything. In the universe, you're part of that connection now. You can bend the world around you, not through brute force, but through understanding. You can manipulate time, space, and matter. You can heal, you can destroy, you can protect. But it's not about control, John. It's about balance." Balance. The word echoed in John's mind, but he couldn't quite grasp its meaning. He was a soldier, a mercenary. He had never been taught to think about balance, only about survival. He had spent his life trying to control his surroundings, trying to keep chaos at bay. This was different, but what does it mean? He asked, his voice growing more desperate. "How do I use it? How do I control it?" Lyra watched him, her expression unreadable. "You don't control it, John. It controls you. Or more accurately, it guides you. The energy within you is not meant to be harnessed for personal gain or power. If you try to force it, it will consume you. That's why you must learn to listen, to understand. Only then will you be able to use it for its true purpose." John took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. The weight of her words hung in the air, and for the first time since the gift had been placed in his hands, he felt a sense of dread. What if he couldn't learn? What if the power inside him was too much to handle? What if, in trying to save the world, he ended up destroying it instead? Lyra seemed to read his thoughts. "It's not about control, John. It's about wisdom. It's about knowing when to act and when to wait. You'll learn the true nature of this power in time. But first, you need to understand its limits." John nodded, though he wasn't sure he fully understood. He wasn't sure he ever would. But he couldn't turn back now. The gift had changed him, and in ways he couldn't predict. It had tied him to something far bigger than himself. Lyra led him to a small console on the ship, its interface glowing with symbols that made no sense to him. She placed her hand on, and the console flickered to life, displaying a map of distant galaxies and stars. It was a chart of the universe, but unlike anything he had ever seen. Each star, each planet, was connected by lines of energy, and as he looked closer, he realized that the lines were constantly shifting, flowing like rivers of light across a dark ocean. "This is the nexus," Lyra said softly, pointing to the intricate web of energy, the source of all power, all life, the key to everything. You now have the ability to access it, to channel its energy. John studied the map, his mind racing. "And I have to go there. I have to be a part of this." The question sounded almost absurd to him, as if he was asking to be part of something he couldn't fully comprehend. Lyra nodded. "Yes, but you are already a part of it, whether you like it or not. The universe is waiting for you, John. The balance is shifting. You are its guardian now." The words hit him harder than he expected. Guardian? He was no hero. He was just a man, trying to make a living, trying to survive. And now he was being asked to save the universe? "You're not alone," Lyra added, sensing his growing unease. "I will guide you, but you must be ready. The path ahead is dangerous. There are those who would use the nexus for their own gain, and they won't hesitate to kill anyone who stands in their way. John swallowed hard, looking out at the swirling stars beyond the ship's window. This was real. This wasn't some mission or job he could walk away from. This was his new reality. The weight of it settled in his chest, but strangely, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a purpose. He turned to Lyra, his resolve hardening. "I'm ready," he said, though his voice trembled with uncertainty. "I don't know how to do this, but I'll figure it out. I'll protect the balance. I have to." Lyra smiled, a quiet understanding in her eyes. "You don't have to do it alone. But the journey will be harder than you think. The forces at play are ancient, and they will stop at nothing to get what they want." John nodded, his mind racing with a million questions, but for the first time, he felt a strange sense of clarity. The universe had a plan for him, whether he was ready for it or not. And now, there was no turning back. The enemy reveals itself. The ship was silent, the hum of the engines a steady pulse beneath their feet. John sat at the helm, his fingers tapping nervously on the console. Outside, the vastness of space stretched endlessly, a sea of stars far too distant to touch. He had grown accustomed to the weight of the power within him, though he still hadn't fully grasped its extent. The gift, the nexus, it was all more than he could process. Yet, in the days since he had received it, his connection to the universe had deepened. The lines between him and the energy that flowed through everything had blurred. He could feel the pulse of stars, the movement of planets, the ebb and flow of cosmic forces. He was more than human now, but with that power came an undeniable truth. There were forces out there that would stop at nothing to harness it, for themselves. John's thoughts were interrupted by a soft beep from the ship's communication system. Lyra entered the cockpit, her face more serious than he had seen it in days. There was something in the air, something dark that made John's heart race. He couldn't explain it, but he knew something was coming. Something he wasn't prepared for. "We're close," Lyra said, her voice calm but with an edge of urgency that John hadn't expected. "Too close." John raised an eyebrow. "Close to what? Where are we heading?" Lyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she moved to the viewport and looked out at the endless expanse of stars. Her eyes, usually filled with mystery and power, now seemed filled with an unease that unsettled him. "We're nearing the border of a forbidden zone," she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. "A place where the nexus's influence is weakest, but also where it's most vulnerable. And that's where they are waiting for us." John felt a chill run down his spine. Who is waiting for us?" Lyra turned sharply, her violet eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his breath catch. "The Dreadborn." The name hit him like a blow to the chest. The Dreadborn, he had heard whispers of them, scattered rumors from the few survivors who had encountered them. They were ancient beings, ancient even by Lyra's standards, and they were said to be unstoppable, merciless in their pursuit of power. The Dreadborn didn't care about planets or civilizations. They cared only about the Nexus. "They've been hunting me for centuries," Lyra continued, her voice steady but filled with a deep, unsettling gravity. "And now they've found me. They know you're with me. They know about the gift. And they will stop at nothing to take it." John clenched his fists, his heart racing. He had known that his involvement with Lyra would have consequences, but he hadn't expected this. He wasn't just up against a corrupt government or a band of mercenaries. He was up against beings that existed beyond time itself, entities who wielded power that could annihilate worlds with the flick of a wrist. "They are here, aren't they?" John asked, his voice low, though he didn't need an answer. He could feel it now, a presence in the very air around him, like a storm waiting to break. The weight of the universe seemed to grow heavier. Lyra nodded slowly. "They have found us. The ship's sensors are already picking up their energy signatures. They're using an old method, familiar, but deadly. The Dreadborn feed on the energy of the Nexus itself. They've been siphoning it for centuries, using it to bend the very fabric of reality. They want to use me as a conduit, to access the full potential of the Nexus, and reshape the universe in their image. John's mind raced. So what do we do now? How do we stop them? Lyra stepped closer to him, her voice steady, though there was an undeniable edge of urgency. We don't stop them by fighting, John. We stop them by staying one step ahead. We need to get to the Nexus, to the heart. That's the only way to prevent them from taking control of it. The heart? John asked, confused. What's that? The heart of the Nexus is a place of great power, she explained, her eyes distant as though remembering something long buried. It's a sanctuary, hidden deep within the Nexus. It's where the original source of the energy resides. The Dreadborn cannot reach it. If we can get there first, we can seal the Nexus off from them. John looked at her, his mind still reeling. From the sheer scale of what was happening, he had thought he was just helping some alien girl escape. Now he was caught in a battle for the very soul of the universe. How do we get there? He asked, his voice shaking with uncertainty. Lyra's gaze softened, though there was still a sadness in her eyes. We'll need to navigate through the Dreadborn's territory. It's a place where time itself behaves differently. We'll have to move quickly, but we'll be able to slip past them if we remain undetected. Just as she finished speaking, the ship jolted violently, throwing both of them to the side. The lights flickered, and the sound of metal groaning echoed through the hull. John grabbed onto the console, his heart pounding in his chest. We've been hit. Lyra shouted, her voice laced with panic for the first time. They found U.S. John quickly checked the ship's systems. The damage was severe. The shields were failing, and the ship's trajectory was unstable. They were in the heart of enemy territory now. They're closing in, Lyra said, her voice strained. I'll try to stabilize the ship, but we need to move. Now, John's mind raced. They were no longer in control of their fate. The Dreadborn had arrived, and they would stop at nothing to take Lyra and the power of the Nexus for themselves. There was only one choice now: run. And pray they could make it to the heart of the Nexus before it was too late. With a determined look, John helped Lyra prepare for the worst. He didn't know how, but he knew they had to make it. They had no other option. The enemy was here, and the universe's balance was at stake. We're going to make it, he said, more to himself than to Lyra. Lyra met his gaze, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of hope and fear. We have to. As the ship shuddered, once more, John tightened his grip on the controls, guiding them into the unknown. The Dreadborn were relentless, but he wouldn't let them win. Not now. Not after everything. This was no longer just about survival. This was about saving everything. A hero's choice, the ship tore through space, its hull groaning under the pressure as it rocketed toward the heart of the Nexus. The Dreadborn were relentless, their ships dark as shadows, slicing through the void with terrifying precision. They had found them, and now there was no escape. John's grip on the controls tightened as the ship bucked and jolted under the weight of the constant bombardment. Lyra sat beside him, her face pale, but her eyes, those glowing violet eyes, were sharp with determination. She had warned him that the Dreadborn would stop at nothing to take the Nexus. Now, John could see it in her eyes, the knowledge that this battle was their last chance. It wasn't just her life at stake anymore. It was the fate of the universe itself. They're gaining on us, John said through gritted teeth, his mind racing. The ship's shields were failing, the external systems barely holding up against the relentless onslaught from the Dreadborn's fleet. We won't make it to the Nexus in time if we keep getting hit like this. We have no choice, Lyra sighed, her voice firm. We need to get to the heart of the Nexus. It's the only place where we can stop them. John's mind swirled with doubt. He had known this moment was coming, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure he was ready for it. What if they failed? What if they couldn't stop the Dreadborn from seizing control of the Nexus? What if he couldn't handle the power inside him? He had been thrust into this role, a role he had never asked for, and now everything rested on his shoulders. "You're ready." Lyra's voice cut through his thoughts. He glanced at her, her expression unreadable but steady, as though she had known his inner conflict before he even spoke. "You've already made the choice. You've accepted the gift. The universe is already bound to you." "But I'm not ready to control it," John said, his voice shaky. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to stop them. How do I protect everyone when I'm not sure I even know how to protect myself?" Lyra turned to him, her violet eyes filled with a deep understanding, as though she had seen this struggle 1,000 times before. "You don't have to control it. You just have to trust it. Trust the Nexus, trust yourself. The gift is part of you now. You've always had the strength inside you. This is your moment. This is your choice." John's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. There was no turning back. The Dreadborn were too close, the stakes too high. If they didn't act now, everything would be lost. He took a deep breath and locked his eyes on the screen ahead of him. The Nexus was in sight now, a swirling mass of energy that pulsed like the heartbeat of the universe. But around it, the Dreadborn ships circled, preparing to strike. The heart of the Nexus was just beyond reach, a sanctuary that could either save them all or doom them to destruction. "Do you know what you're asking of me?" John asked, his voice strained. He wasn't sure if he was asking Lyra or himself. "You're asking me to open the heart of the Nexus to fight the Dreadborn, to protect everything." Lyra nodded, her expression resolute. "You are the only one who can do this. You're the guardian now, John. Your choices have already set everything in motion. The balance is fragile, but you are the key to it." The ship shuddered again as a blast from one of the Dreadborn vessels struck the shields. John gritted his teeth and adjusted the course, weaving through debris and the remnants of shattered asteroids. He could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of the universe bearing down on him. But despite the fear that gnawed at him, something else was rising within him, a surge of energy that was unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was the gift, the Nexus, flowing through him, guiding him. He could hear the hum of the universe, the pulsing rhythm of life itself, all of it connected, all of it centered on the choice he was about to make. John felt it a shift in the air, a moment of clarity. The power was there, in his hands, within his soul. But it wasn't about control, it was about balance. About knowing when to act and when to let go. He didn't have to be perfect. He didn't have to have all the answers. He just had to trust in the power of the Nexus, and trust in himself. "We can do this," he said, his voice steady for the first time since the chaos had begun. "We don't need to fight them the way they want us to. We can protect the Nexus without destroying everything." Lyra's eyes softened as she looked at him, her gaze filled with pride. "You've already chosen, John. Now let's make it count." With a deep breath, John focused on the Nexus ahead. The ship was still under fire, the blasts rattling the hull, but he could feel the energy shifting within him. The Nexus was calling to him, like an old friend, like a part of him that had always been there. He raised his hand, and with it, the ship seemed to come alive, responding to his will. The walls of the cockpit shimmered with a soft blue glow, the energy from the Nexus flowing through him, through the ship. He could see the path ahead of him, a clear route to the heart. The Dreadborn were closing in, but they were no longer a threat. Not to him, not to the Nexus. John let go of the controls, trusting the energy to guide them. He didn't have to force it. The Nexus was with him. He reached out with his mind, stretching the energy across the stars, pulling the Dreadborn ships into the pull of the Nexus itself, weakening their resolve, turning their weapons against each other. The ship surged forward, cutting through the darkness, the heart of the Nexus in sight. It was a swirling mass of energy, a vortex that seemed to stretch beyond time and space. The Dreadborn forces were now disoriented, their ship spinning out of control as the energy of the Nexus bent to John's will. The moment was coming. The choice was made. John pressed forward, his mind focused, his heart calm. They were almost. Their dot with one final push, they broke through the barrier. The heart of the Nexus opened up before them, a brilliant light flooding the cockpit, filling the ship with an energy so pure, so overwhelming, that it took John's breath away. He reached out, extending his hands to it, to the power that now flowed freely through him. And just as the Dreadborn forces reached them, just as they were about to strike, John made his final choice. Not to fight, not to destroy, but to embrace. The balance dot, the heart of the Nexus reacted, its energy enveloping the ship, the stars themselves seeming to bend and twist. The Dreadborn forces, unable to fight against the pure, unrelenting force of the Nexus, began to dissipate, their ships crumbling into nothingness as they were pulled into the energy. The battle was over. The universe had been saved, but for John, this was only the beginning. He had made his choice. He had chosen to trust in the gift, and in doing so, he had changed the course of history forever. A new beginning. The heart of the Nexus pulsed with a deep, otherworldly rhythm, a steady hum that resonated through the very air inside the ship. The light that enveloped them was so brilliant, it felt like it was coursing through John's very soul, cleansing him, transforming him. The Dreadborn, the great cosmic predators who had stalked them, were no more. Their ships disintegrated into streams of light and energy, scattered to the void like dust in the wind. John stood in the cockpit, his hands trembling as the final traces of the Nexus power faded. The silence that followed was profound, almost unnatural. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the ship was calm. The stars outside gleamed, serene and untouched by the battle that had just unfolded. The universe, it seemed, was at peace. For now, but peace, John knew, was fleeting. He turned to Lyra, who was still seated beside him, her eyes closed, her face serene as if she too had been swept up in the power of the Nexus. Her form, usually glowing faintly with a soft ethereal light, now seemed to radiate an even deeper energy, an energy that felt ancient, timeless. John felt an overwhelming sense of loss and relief all at once. The fight had been won, but at what cost? He had made the choice to trust in the gift, to take the Nexus into himself, to protect the balance of the universe. But what did it mean now? What was his place in a universe so vast, so full of unknowns? Was he truly ready for the role he had been thrust into? Could he live up to the responsibility he now carried? Lyra opened her eyes slowly, and for the first time since they had met, there was no fear, no urgency, no overwhelming pressure in them. There was only a deep knowing peace. "You did it, John," she said quietly, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. "You saved us all." John shook his head, still struggling to process the enormity of what had just happened. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "This power, it's not mine. It's the Nexus. I don't even know what I am anymore." Lyra smiled faintly. "You're more than you ever were, John, but you are still you. The gift has only amplified what was already inside of you, your heart, your strength, your will. It's those things that made you the guardian, not the power." John turned to look out the viewport, his eyes tracing the edges of the swirling vortex of energy that was the heart of the Nexus. It was beautiful, indescribable, its energy flowing like a river through the fabric of existence itself. But it was also dangerous. He knew that now. He had felt its power coursing through him, felt the weight of the universe itself in his hands. And yet, despite everything, despite the victories and the battles, something gnawed at him deep inside. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice quieter than he intended. "We've stopped the Dreadborn, but I'm not sure I can keep this balance forever. How do we protect the Nexus? How do we ensure it's safe from others who might try to use it? Lyra's expression softened, her eyes filled with the wisdom of ages. The Nexus will always be a target, John. It always has been. There will be others who seek its power. But it isn't about keeping the Nexus safe, it's about understanding it. We must guard the balance, not by hiding the power, but by guiding it. John frowned, confused. Guiding it? She nodded. The Nexus is a force of creation and destruction, of life and death. It can heal, it can reshape, it can annihilate. But it isn't something that can be controlled with force. You don't. Fight the Nexus, you align with it. You become its protector, not its master. John took a deep breath, trying to digest her words. So what? I just go back to being a mercenary? A guardian who's supposed to keep everything in balance. I'm not ready for that, Lyra. I didn't sign up for this. She chuckled softly, the sound almost like the wind whispering through the stars. None of us ever sign up for the path. We walk, John. You didn't choose to carry the gift, it was given to you. But it's your choice what you do with it. You can fight it, or you can learn from it. You can protect the balance, or you can destroy it. But there's no turning back. John looked at her, the weight of her words settling in. There was no easy way out. There was no simple solution. The power of the Nexus wasn't something he could run from. It was a part of him now, and the universe. The universe was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. Will I always be alone in this? He asked quietly. Will I always have to carry this burden on my own? Lyra's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that was both comforting and powerful. You're never truly alone, John. You have the Nexus, you have me. And you have the universe. We are all connected. And the universe has a way of showing you the path you're meant to walk. All you have to do is keep moving forward. A quiet understanding passed between them, a connection forged in the heat of battle, in the weight of choices made under impossible pressure. The tension that had held John's chest so tightly over the past weeks, the uncertainty, the fear, began to ease, just a little. The path was still unclear, the future still uncertain, but for the first time since he had accepted the gift, John felt like he wasn't walking alone. As the ship continued to glide through space, the stars outside now shimmering with the soft light of the Nexus influence, John knew this was only the beginning. He had made a choice, and that choice had led him here, to this point in time, where the balance of the universe rested in his hands. But what came next was up to him. The universe was vast, its mysteries endless. There were still worlds to save, still enemies to face, still questions to answer. But for now, John knew that he was ready. Ready to protect the Nexus, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And with that knowledge, with that strength, he let go of his doubts. The journey was just beginning.